Hello EFD squad and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football as selected by you. I'm with Pat, I'm with Doug, and the first question comes from Discount Jose. And he's asked, what do you think about Morata to Barcelona? Spicy, this one. And what can Morata / the club, Chelsea and Barca in parenthesis, do to put Morata back in form? A lot of Moratas there. This comes after Marca claimed that the Spaniard has offered himself to Barcelona.
Okay.
And I, for one, would like to make myself available to Barcelona as well. Now, according to the reports, it's more likely to be a loan move until the end of next season, with the Giants then possibly making it permanent next summer. Okay, so how feasible do you gentlemen think this is? Would he be a good fit? Is there an outside chance of it happening? Starting with you on the end, Dougleberry.
Well, I think he'd be a reasonable fit. I don't think he's necessarily... he doesn't look like a Barcelona player in the way he plays necessarily, but he is actually a very solid goal scorer. But his main strengths are, his aerial ability, which wouldn't be utilised in the Barcelona system. And I don't know how good his hold-up play is compared in those tight spaces. He's actually quite good when he's through one-on-one. He's quite consistent that way. But he's best in the air with crosses coming into the box, which wouldn't necessarily suit it. But Barca are looking for this possible, addition up front because Luis Suarez has a sort of ongoing knee issue, and I was reading a bit about it yesterday. They're not quite sure the severity of it and how much it's going to affect his season. It doesn't necessarily mean that he needs a long layoff, but it might just be sort of flaring up throughout the year. We need to find out more information on it, really. And their backup at the moment, essentially, for a striker is Munir, who's got 1 goal and 1 assist in 148 La Liga minutes, which isn't actually too bad. He's made 7 appearances, but only 1 start. And he doesn't necessarily look like he's ever going to be able to lead the line for Barcelona.
I think they probably should have cashed in on him when he had a good season at Valencia.
Exactly.
But it's come and gone now, hasn't it?
So yeah, they're looking for possibly a striker, but in my opinion, this seems like a bit of a waste of money. I know it's only a loan, but even next summer, he'd still cost over 50 million. And they'd be better, wiser to invest it in different areas of their squad. They've still got, obviously, Messi, who can play centrally. They could give more minutes to Malcolm, who's only played 127 minutes of football, and we're nearly at the new year. Poor Malcolm, he is having an awful year. I don't know why they bought him if they weren't prepared to use him. Or maybe he's just taking a long time to adapt to what Valverde wants of him. So for me, it's not really a great fit. I think he'd be better suited to wait it out at Chelsea. When he gets a run of games up, I think he will improve. But he hasn't started he's only started 1 of the last 3 Chelsea games, and Giroud is now the favourite to start in the Premier League. And he got injured last night as well. So there's so much about this deal that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables, and his record is patchy. 16 goals in 45 Premier League games. I suppose it's okay in 22 and 68. If we take a closer look at his underlying numbers, 5 goals in 14 appearances, 10 starts, averaging just over 2.3 shots a game. Pato, 0.5 key passes. For you, do Chelsea let him go at this point in the season? Surely this would only be a scenario should they have a ready-made replacement in January.
Yeah, I don't think they will let him go. But if he could go on loan, then I think it would be great to get him. Like if you could get him in on loan, that would be fantastic. It's probably the best cover you could get. His expected goal is 0.69, which is actually just above Mo Salah, and his actual goals scored per 90. Same as Lacazette, same as Callum Wilson, same as Alexander Mitrovic. 0.5 goals a game. He's scoring real goals. So it's kind of hard to see what he could be doing better. I think the appearance numbers there are a little bit misleading. He's got 14 appearances this season, but he's only played somewhere a little over 800 minutes, I think. So what he does consistently is score. The only thing with Chelsea is their front line looks a lot better and more fluid when they either play with those kind of 3 small wingers, play with Pedro, Willian and Hazard, or they play with Giroud, who is undeniably much better at bringing people into play. So if Morata doesn't do that in the way Sarri wants, then it makes perfect sense to cash in on him. But Barca, yeah, if you could loan him in and Luis Suarez does have this recurrent problem, then I think he'd be great. Like, yes, I understand what you're saying, that like we don't tend to see Barcelona cross a lot, but I think if they had somebody who was an aerial threat, we'd probably see a bit more of that. It's not like they didn't do that in the days of, I don't know, Eto'o and Henry, but you can understand why they're not going to do it now, because they've got a bunch of guys who are under 5'9".
Doesn't suit them, yeah.
So they've absolutely got the passing ability to do it. And I think Valverde is much more kind of pragmatic and willing to adjust his tactics to the personnel at his disposal rather than say we are going to play the Barcelona way. They don't play the Barcelona way anymore. They had less than 50% possession against Spurs at home the other day.
He's never been afraid to play 4-4-2.
Yeah, this is not the Barcelona
That was the first time
we're
at home
used
in the
to.
Champions League, wasn't it? Since
This is not
formation in '92.
But this is not the Barcelona we're accustomed to. And actually, before Pep came along, they hadn't been this kind of super possession heavy side for quite a while. So I don't know. I think it would be quite an interesting move. I would like to see him go somewhere, because clearly at Chelsea, it's not quite the right fit. He's not appreciated. He doesn't feel like he's playing well. Maybe he does just need a new start. The way he responded to some patchy form last season was not what you wanted. I don't mean on the field. I mean the way he obviously perceived it, where he said, "Oh, I do have a mental blockage and I don't feel confident." That's not really the way you want a striker to be.
There's been murmurings of that this year as well.
Yeah.
He's still saying some odd things in the media, or at least it's coming out in the media. Whether he's saying them or not is another matter. But yeah, this knee injury last night, we're not quite sure how severe that is as well, which obviously might throw this whole move into jeopardy and make this whole video a bit redundant. But I don't think it's Sarri said, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem too serious, but if it keeps him out for 4 or 5 weeks, then that's midway through January and Barca won't move for him. But it could be a potentially interesting move.
I don't think Chelsea will be willing to loan him out. That'd be favourable terms for Barcelona. I think if Chelsea were going to part ways with Morata, it would have to be for close to what they paid for him.
Yes.
And they would have to have a ready-made replacement in January. I'm struggling as to who that player might be. They've been linked with Luka Jovic, who of course is absolutely killing it in the Bundesliga for Eintracht Frankfurt. The young 20-year-old, he's averaging something ridiculous, like 4 or 5 shots a game, one of the few strikers in Europe to sort of be hitting those heights, their sort of Harry Kane numbers. And he's got 10 in 11 in all competitions, or maybe 11 in 10 in fact. And he's having a great time of it with his strike partner, isn't he, Sebastian Haller.
Yeah.
And who else is there really for that sum of money? You're looking at Lewandowski. I don't think he's going to leave Bayern Munich for Chelsea. 8 goals in the Champions League, progressing nicely into the last 16, unbeaten in their group. I think the players there will want to, they won't want to leave it as is, particularly Lewandowski. You want to chase Dortmund down, sort of leave on better terms, on his terms. I'm thinking Mauro Icardi. We've talked about him at Chelsea an awful lot. He shares maybe some similar traits with Morata in that he likes to hang around that 6-yard box. He likes
not that heavily involved in play.
A direct style of service. I mean, I just think it'd be a massive mistake by Chelsea at this point, and that injury, like you say, may ward off a lot of interest. But to be competing on 2 or 3 fronts, and to really potentially be overperforming, now considering where they were 3 or 4 months ago, I think they're going to need all the support they can get moving forward. Do you think that Chelsea, is there anyone that strikes you as a wiser acquisition in January?
I think they'll really struggle to get the calibre of player they're looking for in January. I think it's much more likely to happen next summer. And fair play if next summer, if it's still, if Morata's still sort of plodding along, not, excelling in the way that they expected to when they parted £60 million for him. Fair enough if they make a change then. I just don't think they're going to get the calibre of strikers that are going to, make the difference in the Premier League, put them into the Champions League contention next year in January. It's going to be a really difficult window to get, top talents like Icardi out of Inter Milan. So I think they'll be looking at trying to keep hold of Giroud and Morata and keep the output coming up from people like Hazard and Willian and Pedro.
You know what Barcelona should have done? They should have just kept Paco. If they're looking for a backup striker who can deputise well in the absence of Luis Suarez, then I know he's not going to sustain his current scoring rate, and his form in the Champions League has been questionable. I think averaging around 1.2 shots per game when he's played for Dortmund in the Champions League. He did miss some crucial wins, didn't he, over Atletico Madrid and Bruges, which might have skewed his figures somewhat, but they should have just kept him. And now they're left with Munir, who's not as good as Paco, and I suppose they can move Messi forward again. Shades of last season, kind of just playing as that second striker. When you've got Messi in that area of the pitch, I suppose you don't necessarily need him and Suarez against most of the teams in La Liga. But yeah, Chelsea, I think it'll be very much a case of as is for both sides. I can't really see many movers and shakers on the continent. Do you think there's any huge moves in the pipeline for you, Pat?
In January, I don't know.
Difficult to tell, really, isn't
There's
it?
Be good for us
occasionally
if it
one. There's occasionally one or
Hope so.
two.
Traffic, yeah.
You know, like teams who are kind of on the cusp of something might do it, but really it's extremely hard to find value in January. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there'll be any big. We hear about Nicolas Pepe and people like that, but you can't imagine Leo letting him go in January, and they could just wait for the summer.
But where could you see Alvaro Morata, and who do you think are going to be the biggest movers in January? Let us know in the comments below. Moving on to our quickfire questions. First quickfire question then comes from Adnan Zafar, and he said, if Isco leaves Real Madrid, which is the best club and what will suit his style of play? I would say City. Pep would make him a Ballon d'Or contender for sure. Punchy stuff there. That's borderline hot takes territory. Now, since Solari has taken over, Isco has only started 2 of 10 games. One against Melilla in the Copa del Rey, so Spanish minnows, and last time out in the Champions League against CSKA. And we know how that ended. 2 defeats
Not
to
so
the
well.
Russian outfit in the group stage. Only
Horrible.
played 516 minutes in the league all season. That's 11 appearances, but only 5 starts. 16th best in Los Blancos' squad. Now, actually, it's not too surprising because in 17-18, and we all know that Zidane liked him, he only played around 1,700 minutes. So he is always kind of been prone to rotation. But it does seem like there's an element of it being personal this time round, let's say. So do you think he'll have to leave, and where should he go if he was to leave? Is it as simple as Manchester City, lads?
Pat, do you want to take this?
Well, I mean, Manchester City would be the prime contenders, or Chelsea. You know, a Sarri side would be interesting, and then you move Kante back, and Isco becomes the ball progressor when Kovacic returns to Real Madrid. But I don't know. I think it'd be insane for him to leave because you have no idea who the next proper manager is going to be. It's not going to be Solari. I think Solari's definitely gone in the summer, if not before. So I don't know why you'd leave a club which might well get a manager in who loves you. Like, it just seems like you'd stick around and see how that goes. I don't know. If Real Madrid get rid of Isco, it would be one of their stupider moves over the last few years, and that is saying something. He's the only player they have who's not kind of 28 plus, who has the ability to be a superstar kind of attacking player. Asensio might be very good, but his output at the moment is not spectacular. It's good. It's fine. He doesn't look like he's going to turn into a Bale. He doesn't look like he has that ability at the moment. So he's very exciting to watch. You don't want to run your attack through him. Isco is far better at creating than he is. And I think we slightly overrate Asensio relative to other people of a similar age, like Martial or Ousmane Dembele, who are clearly more talented and have much better output. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're going to run your attack through anybody in that Real Madrid side, you'd say that Isco would be the one going forward. And when you look at Isco and Kovacic, you think, you know what, we've got the heart of a good midfield for the next few years. If they let Isco go, then it's going to be an even bigger rebuild in the summer, and that's genuinely worrying for Real Madrid.
He was a crucial piece of Zidane's winning formula, wasn't he, in that floating number 10 role? And it kind of means that, I guess, Modric and Kroos don't have to have the legs they once had when you have Isco picking up in these pockets, super press resistant. I think Madrid fans should be furious with this rumour. Duke?
Yeah, they shouldn't be happy at all. He's been so consistent. I mean, since he joined Real Madrid, he's averaging a league goal contribution every 0.4 a game, which is a pretty solid record considering that he's been in and out of the side. I'd like to see him nail down a number 10 slot somewhere. And if he's not going to get it at Real Madrid, then why not move? He'd be great at Bayern Munich if James Rodriguez doesn't want to stick around up past this year. Inter Milan are always talking big in the transfer market at the moment. I don't know whether they've got the money for Isco, but he'd be fantastic there, playing off Icardi as well. He's just a really good all-round player who deserves more starts and doesn't really deserve this treatment, especially when people like Dani Ceballos are getting so many more minutes ahead of him. He's a fine player, but he's not as good as Isco.
Did you see some of his posts recently on social where he was, I think it might have been Instagram, and he was putting like fat question mark and then showing photos of his abdomen, clearly in very good shape.
Isco?
So
really?
There is that sort of element of his professionalism has been questioned, and there has been some players that have come out and said that we all need to kind of pull in the same direction, maybe intimating that he's been a bit disruptive in training, but not kind of wholly fair, I guess, to level that at him when just reading between the lines. But yeah, it seems to have got quite personal between those two. And the thing is, Solari in these games has entrusted a fair few youngsters with minutes that could have been given.
Llorente for one, yeah.
Yeah, to Isco. Now that was our first quickfire question and took quite some time, so let's absolutely smash through the others. So Adash_10 has asked, what do Roma have to do to get back in the top 4? Passo.
I mean, they've got a lot of young talent, so to a certain extent they need to be patient. Pellegrini looks absolutely sensational this season. But yeah, I don't know. Generally, they're going to turn over talent and probably need to wait for a particular core to come together. You know, at the moment they've got promising wide talent, but nobody there who's a superstar. Like Under looks good, Kluivert looks good, Schick looks good, but at the same time you kind of think Perotti's quite good, though now kind of old. Yeah, there's nobody there who's going to explode immediately, it seems. So they definitely need to replace Dzeko. And probably think about the long-term future of that central midfield, like the style they want to play. I'm still not sure how much I like Di Francesco. I think that they got a little bit lucky in the Champions League last season, though they were good in games as well. But they got a little bit lucky, and I think that's what's maybe bought him a bit more patience, because in the league they haven't been spectacular. So yeah, by and large, also they need to think about the defence in the long term too, because some of their centre backs who've been really reliable servants over the last few years are due to age out. So
Federico Fazio.
Well, Manolas is still fairly young, or well, he's in his kind of middle age as a footballer, but he does have some consistent injury issues. Whereas Fazio is definitely at the tail end of his career.
Yeah, I also think we need to bear in mind that they've lost, a goalkeeper that was just exceptional last year, and played behind a pretty competent defence as well. I think they have the second best defensive record in the league. And Robin Olsen, to be honest, I haven't seen enough of him to say for sure, but he's not nearly at the standard of Alisson, and not a disaster by any means, but that's a massive drop down. And yeah, whenever I've seen them play, there's just been a slight lack of fluidity throughout the team. There just seems like not a very cohesive attacking unit. And Zonzi hasn't been as good as Strootman, and Strootman and Daniele De Rossi at times last year were really solid together. But yeah, like Pato, I'm not really convinced by their Champions League run to the semi-finals last year. They conceded a lot of goals in that time in the Champions League. They're obviously that amazing game in Rome. But then I think they must have conceded about 8 goals to Liverpool across 2 legs in the semi-final. And then this year hasn't been really convincing either. So big pressure for Di Francesco, which is bizarre considering he did so well last year on paper anyway.
If they kept Leandro Paredes, you imagine they'd be in much better state now. But instead they've gone through a slew of central midfielders since. I mean, Strootman's been there for a long time, but has had his issues. De Rossi is obviously pretty much gone.
Strootman's at Marseille now, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Though he's been pretty poor. And obviously as well, they've gone through Nzonzi and Gonalon. And I think if they kept Paredes, they'd be in great shape.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Eusebio Di Francesco, the other teams around Roma in Serie A have just exponentially improved, haven't they? Even Atalanta's underlying numbers under Gasperini are absolutely fantastic, and they've sort of been a club who have been knocking on the door of Champions League football for a long time. So they're now competing with a resurgent Lazio, who've kept Ciro Immobile, who've kept Milinkovic-Savic, Atalanta, who have always had the wares of Papu Gomez. AC is straddling the Europa League and Champions League at the moment, and I'm not entirely sure if Gattuso is the manager that can lead. Well, Siri, if you give me the opportunity to explain, mate, I'm not quite sure if Gattuso
like AC Milan.
is the man to lead them back to Champions League football. If they got someone in like Conte, then I think Roma would be in deep trouble. Inter Milan, Spalletti seems to be getting sort of their progress kind of seems to be 1 step forward, 2 steps back at times. Although Brozovic is playing exceptionally well in the league. They're still heavily reliant on Perisic and Icardi for their goal scoring output. I think 40 their 60 goals came from those two last season, but they've tried to arrest that, haven't they, with Lautaro Martinez, with sort of maybe other attacking. Politano was the one I was thinking of, sorry, and he's been very productive at the start of this campaign, actually, always an attacking threat. So they've added, and I think there's more to come from those players. They might be underperforming somewhat at the moment because they're still gelling as a side. Now England's been in and out of the side, only 8 starts in Serie A. So I can kind of see other teams getting it together, and Roma are further away from that than their rivals. But anyway, moving on. Can Dortmund win the Champions League? This comes from Caleb.
No, I don't think so.
No, probably not.
I think along with Ajax, they're probably the biggest underdogs, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I'd like to see them.
Oh, and Porto are through as well.
But yeah, I don't think Porto are as well equipped as those boys.
Porto weren't very good in the group stage.
Yeah. Okay, next question's from Finley then. What position do you feel deserves more credit?
I think the hardest position to play is definitely fullback. There's
Says
so
a fullback.
Sorry?
Says a guy who plays fullback.
Yeah. I just don't really play anywhere. I'll just play where I'm told to. But fullback there's so much demanded of you in the modern game in terms of attacking. You've got to be this fantastic athlete. You've got to be really defensively solid. You can't be a liability at defending set pieces. You've just got to be a complete package. And when you see it done well, it can completely transform a team's fortunes. They're such a crucial component of most formations tactics now. So I'd give a shout out to fullbacks.
Centre backs. I think that people constantly talk about like this lost art of defending and about how there are no good centre backs and how it's impossible to find a quality centre back. Centre backs are better now than they've ever been. They have to do so much more and they do it better. Like they're fitter than they've ever been. They've got to be more involved in passing than they've ever been. They've got to be faster, bigger. They've got to do so many different things and often cover a lot of space because they're playing behind pressing teams. There are tons of great centre-backs around, but we constantly hear about how there are no good central defenders in the world and how great people like, Vidic were kind of 5 to 6 years ago, and then beyond that, people like Maldini were, and Maldini was amazing. But the idea that centre-backs were just generally better 10 or 15 years ago, they really weren't. Teams just played more conservatively back then. They had more protection and they had to do less. And I don't think people seem to notice that for some reason.
I always think central midfield. I mean, central midfield will probably get its dues more so than the positions that you guys have suggested, but it's the hardest role for sure. And I think, much like you guys have just said there, when you have that fulcrum, that focus of the side, it galvanises every other player around them. And I just think you have to be so intelligent as a central midfielder, and we've seen how Modric impacted that Croatia side and impacted Real Madrid over the last 4 or 5 years. It's no coincidence that he's been a mainstay at that club in their Champions League successes. It's not all been down to Cristiano Ronaldo, has it? And N'Golo Kante for France, Paul Pogba for France. So I think the guys who, and like I said, they get their credit, but they have to shoulder an awful lot of responsibility. And
setting the tempo, defensive work, the whole thing.
Is there a fly there? Okay. Just thought you whipped your neck up. I'd still say central midfielder. And I look at Alan this season for Napoli. They lose Jorginho, and then in steps Alan, this central midfielder who can attack, defend, transition, contribute, to goals with assists, and provide just an array of passing that have maintained his side despite losing their talisman and manager. So I'd say central midfield. Last question. What is the best measure for how good a defender is, and is there a defensive equivalent to expected goals? Pat, do you want to take this one from Frians?
No, it's really, really hard to assess defenders. Fullbacks we can do a little bit better because fullbacks tend to have more similar roles than centre-backs do. Being a centre-back in one system can be extremely different to being a centre-back in another system. And fullbacks overall tend to have more similar responsibilities and similar areas of the pitch to cover. It's worth looking at tackles and interceptions, and you can look at tackle success as well. So how often a player completes a tackle that they attempt and how often they get dribbled past. That's quite an interesting thing. Obviously aerial wins. Aerial wins are useful, though you again want to look at percentage rather than raw number, because it depends on the league you're playing, how many aerial balls you face. Generally speaking, we're still in the process of learning how to assess defenders, and as a result I find it extremely hard to find centre-backs I like, because generally speaking you need to watch an awful lot of footage to get an idea. So no, that's something that's still happening at the moment, and I imagine that that people in clubs are some way ahead of what we see in the kind of fanalist sphere. But maybe in the next 2 to 3 years we'll start to get some more interesting metrics that let us know how good defenders actually are. But for the time being, I'm afraid you're just going to have to watch the games and use the stats to inform what you're seeing.
Pretty emphatic there. Let's move on to our big match preview. Okay, so we've gone back to Serie A for our big match preview. It's on Monday at 7:30, Atalanta versus Lazio. So you have to wait until after the weekend to see this crunch time, how it pans out. So Atalanta, just to give you some context, gentlemen, started the season disastrously. 1 win in their first 8 games, yielding 3 draws and 4 losses, left them 17th. But since then, they've won 5 of their last 7, sort of powers of recovery that we were talking about before, scoring 20 goals in that period. So really putting together a convincing run. Now sits 7th, 4 points off their Monday opponents. Now, in fact, only Napoli and Juventus, with 32 each, have scored more than their 29 goals. Papu Gomez back amongst the goals. The Rune of ex-Middlesbrough fame playing really well this season, as well as several other candidates. Now, Gasparini's finished 4th and 7th before with Atalanta, so it'll be interesting to see if he can take them to new heights after arresting that slump at the start of the season. Duvan Zapata, of course, spearheading a lot of these Atalanta attacks, but they've only won 1 in 8 against Lazio, Doogie. How have Lazio, how have they fared at the start of this season? Because, again, in and amongst it, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the time. Simone Inzaghi.
Exactly. No, they are in and amongst it. They've had a slightly weird start to the year, is how I describe it. They're 5th at the moment. They're a point behind Milan. But when they've come up in the bigger games, they've come a cropper, really. They've had 4 losses this season, and they've been to Napoli, Juventus, Roma and Inter Milan. So they're big tests. They've generally failed. Although they were slightly unlucky in that I remember the first game of the season, I think they played Napoli, and Napoli came back with 2 pretty late goals, and Lazio actually played incredibly well. They're 4th for shots per game, and that's gone up slightly from their 17-18 stats, and their defence has marginally improved as well. But again, they're just so reliable on Ciro Immobile up front. He scored 10 goals in 15 games this season, which is 45% of their total league goals, and no one else has got more than 3. So Joaquin Carrera and Marco Parolo have got 3 apiece. And other than that, the goals have been slightly spread out throughout the team, but no one really sort of, having a fantastic year in front of goal. And there's been a slight downturn in Milinkovic-Savic's numbers as well. Not too alarming. He's got 1 goal and 1 assist in 14, but expected goals suggest that should have been 2 goals and 3 assists. So he's been slightly unfortunate as well. But his underlying stats have taken a slight decrease, and he's certainly not being linked with those £100 million moves anymore that we heard just 6 months ago. It's all gone slightly quiet on that front. So it's been a strange season for Lazio.
Very solid though, aren't they? Lucas Leiva playing out of his skin yet again. I believe he won their Player of the Year last season. You've got Wallace, who you actually mentioned
on Sunday Vibes.
On Sunday Vibes, playing really well after recovering from a big injury and posting around 4 tackles and interceptions.
Exactly, and about 5 completed long balls.
So we've got 29 goal Atlanta versus a defensively solid or an unlucky Lazio side as well. How do you think it's going to play out, Pat?
I have no idea, really. I hope that Papu Gomez has a good game, but I actually think this is just a game for people who are interested in talent. I mean, Papu Gomez, this is the swan song of his career. I think he's 30 now, but 3 shots, 3 key passes a game. I mean, obviously his performances have declined a little from the days of, 16 goals, 10 assists last year or the year before. It's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it wasn't last year, it was the year before that. 16, 17.
So you're still seeing a fantastic player in him. Remo Freuler in the midfield, we've talked about quite a lot recently. And obviously then, Correa, I think, is a really interesting talent at Lazio, especially because Milinkovic-Savic has been pretty poor this season, So I don't know, I'm not really sure how I see this one going, because I kind of think that Lazio are one of the most unpredictable teams in Serie A. They're capable of being staggeringly good, and they're capable of getting the shit kicked out of them, which they do tend to do, as you pointed out, quite reliably against the big sides.
Yeah.
So but this is arguably a battle of 2 of the most underrated managers in Europe. I don't know. I think you guys covered all the stats. What do you think the score's going to be?
Well, yeah, as Chris sort of mentioned, Atalanta haven't beaten Lazio. They've only beaten them once in their last 8 attempts, and that was in November 2015, I think. So quite a while ago. But they're at home. I think it will probably be quite an entertaining draw. I don't know particularly why, but that's what I'm thinking. Maybe a 2-2.
Oh, okay.
No, that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, then football wins too. But what do you guys think? Who's going to win? Vote in the poll just above. That is Continental Club for another week. An action-packed week. We've had a full-on schedule, haven't we, over Christmas?
We have indeed.
We've got podcasts coming. We've got new content on FDFC. Stat Wars, the league is wrapping up.
Yes.
I'm actually playing you later today.
Yeah, I know.
I've got to beat this
Massive.
man to get into the playoffs.
Otherwise, against me again.
Otherwise it's me.
Otherwise, this man goes into the final. All will
tight.
be explained on the video. Guys, thank you for joining. That's all. Any last words,
Have a good weekend, guys.
There we go. Lovely job.
See you later.